We start tonight with new details on the Canadian military member accused of breaching the grounds at Rideau Hall last week. CBC News has obtained documents that outline details about the charges, including an alleged threat to the Prime Minister. Corey Hurren is also charged with numerous weapons violations. The CBC's Catherine Tunney joins us now from Ottawa. Cat, welcome, thanks for doing this. Lots of new information in these documents. What did we learn today about Corey Hurren?
Yeah, well, we're getting a sense piece by piece about what actually happened last Thursday on the grounds of Rideau Hall, which, of course, as viewers of this show will know, is where the Governor General and the Prime Minister have their official residences. So according to these court documents, which is basically what the RCMP has sworn into court, Corey Hurren allegedly had 4 loaded firearms in his possession last Thursday. He was armed allegedly with 2 shotguns, a rifle, and a revolver, according to the RCMP. And the charges suggest that he did not have a license for the revolver, which is a restricted firearm. He also had a prohibited high-capacity magazine with him as well, according to these documents. As you said, on Friday, we learned that he was charged with uttering threats against someone, and today we learned who that was, and it was the Prime Minister. So he's accused of uttering a threat to, quote, cause death or bodily harm to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. We don't know exactly what was said or what was in that threat, but obviously it sounds like the police were taking this quite seriously. And of course, just to remind viewers, though, Trudeau and his family nor the Governor General were actually on the ground at the time of this incident. Okay, so we know, or the allegations, because none of this has been tested or proven in court yet, but essentially armed to the teeth and going there with bad intent is what the allegations are from the police. But still a lot of outstanding questions here. What sticks out for you? Well, the why. We still don't have a sense of why he did this, what the motivation is behind this. On Friday, during a press conference with the RCMP reporters, we're trying to get that out of them and asking, do you know the motivation? Do you have a motive? They seem to suggest, yes, that something came up during their interview that they did with him right after his arrest, but they wouldn't go into details, citing the ongoing investigation and the ongoing court case now. So still want to get a sense about what led him through those steps to end up where he is right now. Sources also told CBC that there was a note in the truck, the truck that he had driven from Manitoba to Ottawa. So want to know more about what was in that note. Does that speak to the motive? There's been lots of reporting about his online activities, both by CBC and our colleagues at the Toronto Star and other news organizations. So trying to get a sense about what that is all about, and also questions about the timeline. It took about 2 hours from when he allegedly breached that gate and then headed towards the greenhouse before they arrested him. And about 90 minutes of that was spent, trying to talk to him. So very interested to know what was going on in those conversations and why the RCMP and other police that responded used those tactics on that day. So we know that these things often take some time to resolve. What happens next in this story? Yeah, well, Corey Hurren remains in custody right now. He's waiting for a bail hearing that's going to happen at the end of next week, so waiting for that. Now, the RCMP's Integrated National Security Team, or INSET, is leading the investigation, and that is noteworthy. That stands out. This is kind of an elite team that deals with terrorist groups and other individuals and groups that are trying to, or pose a threat, I guess, to national security. So their involvement will be interesting to watch, why they got the call and why they are now leading the investigation. So we'll see if more details come up in the evidence in court on that front. And then also, the RCMP are also reviewing security at Rideau Hall. They're always very tight-lipped about security around VIPs, including the Prime Minister, but they did say they have since bolstered security at Rideau Hall, and they're going to review what happened to see if they need to add more as well. Okay, Catherine, thanks so much for your work on all this. That is the CBC's Catherine Tunney. So how should we interpret what we know so far about Corey Hurren? And how will investigators try to establish a motive? Jessica Davis is a former strategic analyst with CSIS. She is now the president of Insight Threat Intelligence. Jessica Davis, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
When we look at these allegations, he ran through a gate, he was armed to the teeth, and he was intent on harming the Prime Minister. When you look at the information contained in this, what do you draw from that information?
So when I'm looking at all of the information that's sort of floating around out there, and to be fair, there isn't actually all that much, I'm thinking about it in three different ways. I'm thinking about it in terms of motive, tactics, and target. So to take the motive off the top, we don't know very much about that at all. There's been a little bit of back and forth about potentially pandemic and economic difficulty being a potential motive there. But there's also been a lot of chatter about this QAnon post that was posted to his social media. The thing about that, though, that I really want to caution is that this post was put up on his work social media back in March. That's many, many months before this incident occurred. And the timing of that, I do think, is significant. We have seen different incidents that have been motivated by particular ideologies and been substantiated by like a single social media post, but that generally immediately precedes the incident. And it's really one amongst many posts, the rest of which are mostly pandemic related at this point.
Right. And for people who may not know what QAnon is, it's sort of this extreme conspiracy theory populated primarily in the United States. A lot of people who are supporters of Donald Trump and maybe believe the pandemic itself may have been orchestrated and not just a naturally occurring virus. And this was posted on his Facebook page several months ago.
Yeah, his Instagram account.
There you go.
Yeah, from his business. And I'm not saying that that couldn't be a motive, and that actually QAnon could, in theory, be something that motivates what could be described as terrorist violence. But in this case, I think that the link is being drawn a little bit too strongly. And then in terms of the tactics, I think it's very interesting. You know, he rammed the gates of Rideau Hall, and we know that there are that is a common terrorist tactic, and he was very well armed, as you say. But at the same time, he actually didn't shoot at any of the RCMP. And so those two things, I think, are a little bit in contradiction for me. And then finally, the target of the incident, which is presumably the Prime Minister, since that was who he's alleged to have uttered threats against, that's an inherently political target. But at the same time, you know, given the absence of clear motive for us, you know, it's really difficult to say what's happening here.
So let's unpack a little bit of this, right? Because as you say, accused of ramming a truck through a security gate, knocking that down, evading detection for a little while, and carrying multiple weapons. But as you say, it did end peacefully, right? After a conversation with the RCMP. So how do we interpret that not a single shot was fired after such a dramatic and forceful entrance?
Yeah, I don't think we can draw any strong conclusions from that, to be fair. You know, maybe the RCMP did an excellent job of de-escalating the situation. Maybe he never had any intent of actually harming anyone. There's a lot of hypotheses here and very little information on which to base a good judgment.
Okay, and I want to pivot back to sort of the conspiracy theories that we were talking about that were posted on social media, things like QAnon, something called Event 201, which pulls at these threads of the conspiracy of Bill Gates and vaccines and the connections to COVID-19. There is what do we know about conspiracy theories and terrorist or violent acts? I mean, is there an overlap here?
There's been some really interesting research that basically points out that, you know, conspiracy theories and many different types of terrorist ideology and propaganda coexist. So people that consume one often consume the other. Now, in terms of the Venn diagram of what that looks like, there's only a small amount of overlap really in the middle of people consuming both. So there's lots of people who are really into conspiracy theories that have absolutely no affiliation or interest in terrorist ideology or propaganda, and vice versa. But there is an interesting overlap in terms of where they live together on the internet particularly.
You know, we've used the word terrorism a couple of times, and it's certainly been a word that's been raised in the immediate aftermath of this event. Omar Al-Ghabra, who is the parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister, tweeted out a link to the story about these charges today, saying the definition of terrorism, violence against civilians for political ends. When we look at this, should we be considering this as a terrorist investigation?
That's definitely a consideration here. But again, I think there's a lot of information here that's sort of contradicting each other in terms of helping us come to a strong judgment about what this may be. If this individual's motivation was broadly political, I think that could be construed as terrorism. But it may also turn out to be a much more personal motivation that doesn't really have any connection to broader ideology, movement, political objective. So, I think it's really early. I think we need to be really cautious in terms of interpreting the very sparse amount of information that we have.
So just based on the fact that the Prime Minister was the alleged target, that a politician as the target, that's not enough to draw the broader conclusion?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, so what should investigators be looking for right now? Based on your experience working on terrorism investigations, what should investigators be looking for right now to try to discern what the motive is?
Well, because we understand sort of the tactics and the target of the situation, the motive is going to be critical. So they're going to be looking for maybe other social media posts, communications with other individuals that may express what he was intending to do, if anything. Again, as Catherine Tunney pointed out, that note could hold a lot of clues here. But those are the broader things. And then, of course, understanding sort of what kind of media and social media he was consuming and participating in will all help point to a motive. In this case, though, because the alleged perpetrator is alive, which is different than in many other investigations that we've seen in the past, we're actually going to be able to hear from him, and hopefully he'll tell us what he was hoping to do.
Okay. Jessica Davis, thank you so much for your insight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That's Jessica Davis. She's a former strategic analyst with CSIS. She is now the president of Insight Threat Intelligence.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.